Did you know fairy tales were part of the oral tradition, as in they were spoken long before they were written? If not, then good, because we're gonna talk about it today. I'm so excited. I wanted to make this podcast for like months, and I kept putting it off because I wanted to learn more about it. And then I learned so much about it, and I had to make the distinction of what to keep and what not. Anyway, I am really happy today on this wonderful sunny day. Before 1 hour it was raining cats and dogs. I'm here with 3 notebooks. One is a journal, but the other 2 are here. Who am I if not the owner of emotional supporting notebooks? The other thing supporting me right now is this mug. I love this mug. I'm trying to eat. I'm trying to drink cocoa with almond milk because I love cocoa, but it doesn't love me. Unreciprocated love arrests me. So, you might be asking, what do I mean by oral tradition? Because most of you will probably know fairy tales from Brothers Grimm, or if you are into that stuff, you have probably heard the name Charles Perrault. So we know fairy tales as something that our moms mostly read us to sleep. And it's very interesting that we begin to read, we begin to think that, oh, I read this in school and I will be reading. Reading publicly is a skill, so maybe I should master it. When in reality, the only time someone reads something to us is mostly during a mother reading a fairy tale. We have associated a fairy tale with a lot of pictures, like colorful, with children or happy animals. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but fairy tales used to be for adults and shouldn't be only for children. But why do we think they are for children? Because this gentleman, Charles Perrault, who was born on 1628, decided to take some fairy tales from the oral tradition and make them really short because, classicism and all those rules classicism used to have, and present them to another public of another class, which was the public of young girls and young boys in the court of Versailles. Fairy tales were not only for a teaching model, but also for amusement. On a lighter note, I did my nails and I have lashes. It's very discreet. And I'm richer by another ring. Because, birthday, I'm a Pisces. You didn't wish me happy birthday, and I'm mad at all of you. But it's okay, it's something that I have to work on, apparently, during therapy. We'll discuss that in another episode. So this gentleman, Charles Perrault, takes those fairy tales and really shortens them and cuts some of the cruel scenes. And you're gonna say to me, what cruel scenes actually? And we're gonna return back to the start. Fairy tales weren't for children. Fairy tales used to describe life with a lot of symbols, a lot of metaphors, and they were part of a ritual most of the times. I mean, rituals are everywhere in life, we've talked about this before, but adult people of, let's not say France, circa the 17th century, there used to be a man usually traveling from a village to another one, and as a tradition he used to say some fairy tales to a lot of people, or a gathering, like someone invites people to their house, or an outside feast, for example. And he was an important man. There wasn't only one. This job was important because people needed amusement, and that was how people communicated, and how we see the same fairy tale in a lot of traditions. And fun fact, one of the earliest versions of Cinderella was written back in China. I don't know if this is the exact same one, but it was so similar and people genuinely talk about this today. One could think that this is such an unimportant matter. We learned that in the university. Like, I took a subject on that. As in everything, especially in something short that doesn't have the room for explanation, we trace signs, symbols, and semiotics really paid off. For example, a really important and famous fairy tale, Red Riding Hood, used to be about a girl, a small girl, passing a forest and then finding her grandma. And the wolf plays a part in that. The young girl begins alone, and in the oral traditions, it means that it's a child. And as soon as she begins to follow the path, she begins to enter adolescence, and the wolf appears. And usually the wolf might ask her in some oral traditions, in some oral fairy tales, do you want to go from the road of this or the road of that? And I don't remember that. I'm so lazy to to remember the word. One symbolized dancing and experimenting a little bit in common reality. That meant an adolescent girl meeting a boy that could either treat her badly or all that misery and danger that lies ahead. And when she reaches her grandma, she has become a woman, and she cooks for her grandma in some versions. There was a really important one where she didn't cook for her grandma, meaning we didn't see her really becoming a woman and cooking for her own family, but she is sitting down to eat the meal, and a bird is talking to her, and it's like, hey, watch what you're eating. It's blood. What we are talking about here is her, the Red Riding Hood, eating her grandma. And the bird, the consciousness or the instinct or even someone else was like, hey, watch out, the wolf really killed your grandma and you're about to eat her. Red Riding Hood isn't in fact red. Back in the day, before it was written, Red Riding Hood wasn't red. No one mentions that she was red. She wore something red. You know why we call her Red Riding Hood? Because French people used to wear those colors. So Charles Perrault really put something in there that gives away the time, gives away the place. And it's so bizarre because the magic of Charles Perrault is that when he begins to write a fairy tale, he says, once upon a time, what time? Where? Once upon a time, in a forest far from the sea, there was a girl. What girl? Where? So we have the absence of time, yet we have a lot of elements that give away the time. Stay patient, we're gonna find out. And to finish with the symbols of Red Riding Hood in the oral tradition, there was a man who tried to help her. And that particular man is very present in a lot of versions. Sometimes he helps the girl cross a river. When she doesn't cross a river, with the help of the man, women are there to help, which goes to say women power, girl power, oh my god. But really, in a fairy tale, in a version, there were women who tied their clothes, their just washed clothes, from the river and helped her cross the river so the wolf didn't catch her. It's nice that we have girl power, it's not nice that we needed girl power. We see Perrault wanting to give different models for the girls and different models of behavior for the boys. Which means boys were applauded for being strong, for being intelligent, for not being actually patient. Patience was for the girls, and what was imposed? It's so interesting, and it's gonna be a great opposition towards the end of my podcast. He praises being Christian, being a good Christian. We have an amazing fairy tale, Bluebeard. Madeline Argy has gone into an in-depth analysis of this fairy tale, and if you want, you can check that out. I am not sure which episode of hers was, but if you're interested so much in that, please go check that out if you haven't already. I mean, who doesn't love Pretty Lonesome? In Bluebeard, we have the girl. It's actually a very nice story. It's actually a fairy tale about curiosity and how Charles Perrault really says, don't listen to your curiosity because curiosity killed the cat. But satisfaction brought it back. But he doesn't say that. He just stays on the first part. And this is why the first part, Curious to Kill the Cat, is so commonly known, as in Satisfaction Brought It Back. Isn't? I mean, at least not where I am from. There's a woman who is just married to this guy who has a blue beard. He says to her, honey, I'm out. And she says, okay, I'll wait. And he says, great, wait. Do everything. You have a palace, do that. But don't enter that room. You know why? She obviously entered that room, even in Charles Perrault. And she finds a pool of blood and bodies from his previous wives. Not one, many. She is freaking out. The blue guy comes and says, what did you do? She is saved in Charles Perrault by praying. She says, please grant me the right to pray before I get killed. And he says, okay. And her brothers come, and from the time she takes to pray, her brothers manage to come and rescue her. What Charles Perrault has done is praise not listening to our instinct. And I'm not gonna say girl power here. I'm just gonna say everybody has an instinct. No matter. We say that women have a strong instinct just because women were more badly treated. And I stand by that. Whoever is more suppressed develops a stronger instinct out of survival. And even in that fairy tale, we still see a lot of things that give away the time. In that particular fairy tale, we have a room in the castle because Charles Perrault gave a description, and there was a room specifically for storing there the furniture from the seasons, because in that castle they used to have furniture for the summer and furniture for the winter. These types of rooms were specifically seen at the same time Charles Perrault was alive. They used to be part of a wealthier family, not necessarily the prince or a duchess, someone really well. Charles Perrault was himself part of high bourgeoisie and nothing more. He was the minister at some point, and he used to be really fan of the king, Roi Soleil. That's why he doesn't go against it. He promotes what the king wants to see and what everybody else is on the same boat on doing. And this really brings up the question of people were initially free. Like, they could snap their fingers and be like, we are collectively mad at this madness, and just move on. But they didn't. They became prisoners of their own limitations. And not only their own, whatever happens inside happens on the outside. If I am a prisoner of my limitations, the ones that I believe that I have, then the society itself will believe that the society, as society, is imprisoned to its own limitations, imposed by people collectively. If you zoom out of it, because we are not from the same season of the history, we can see that, they were prisoners, and they could easily do something about it. Can we? Are we prisoners? Can we do something? Can we do something on a personal level? Can we do something on a collective level? Of course, collectiveness has to be more organized. Do we have it as a value to really examine our own limitations? Returning back to the point. In oral traditions, one could really make a fairy tale long or short. Charles Perrault really kept that simple. It wasn't a big fairy tale no matter what, because classicism was based on some rules from ancient Greece and Rome, but you shouldn't tire the public, and you shouldn't express something really violent or something that could shock the public. Not the public as in the people, like the audience. That's why a lot of cruel elements were pushed down and they were avoided. Of course, girls were praised to be quiet, praised to not be curious. They were in that way easily manipulated. As in opposition to boys, beauty wasn't praised. Obedience wasn't praised, because they were put on almost on a pedestal to prove that they're intelligent, strong, and they can make decisions. And I think this is part of the reason we see nowadays a lot of men being princesses. Like, we want roles to be reversed because those archetypes were suppressed long ago. You can see on the internet flowing around the term being called divine feminine, being obedient, and they'll come to you. I have had one man come to me. And I have had so many when I came to them, solely to feed my ego. But the roles have been reversed. Of course, there are men who like their women obedient, but these types of men don't have besides them a smart woman. And smart women don't have besides them a very smart man on all the time. And this is called the oddity of balance, I'll say. Obviously, okay, attraction, I can make a specific episode about that, but attraction isn't always something that has to do with perfection or complete balance. But we attract what we are and we attract what we're missing. Missing can be something subconscious also. That long period of suppression of a woman's voice and a man's soft side has resulted in the other extreme of men wanting to be princesses. And I'm not the product of my society, I'll say that, and that would be wrong, but not against men being soft. I'm just looking at an extreme again. But if we pass on the second extreme, we have passed the first and the second, first being divine masculine and the second being, oh my god, men are princesses. We'll find the middle way. We're really close to that. We as in society, because I'm gonna live my last breath and men are gonna be princesses. And this is so odd because we associate intelligence with how well someone will predict the future. And that's on pattern recognition. But what do we do with that? What do we do with all those philosophers who are saying to us, hey, you know what? We saw the future. What do you do with that? Nothing. We have a great phenomenon, I'm making a parenthesis here, which is called phenomenon Welbeck. He's very cynic, Welbeck, this guy, I love this guy. He's very cynic and he has predicted and he will predict. He will keep on predicting some stuff. What do? Do we give a lot of gravity in that? No. Do we ignore him? Also no. We as in society, obviously, I don't ignore Welbeck. So, as I said before, something that might have rang a bell to you was the man that helped Red Riding Hood. Now, the help is very essential to a fairy tale, and this wonderful guy from Russia, Vladimir Prop, came to this earth and said, let's analyze morphologically what the fairy tale is. And he has found some roles. We have the hero and the hero's journey. And this is also, I'm going to refer to another great podcast episode. It's called The Hero's Journey by Know Thyself. This is the podcast name. It's about occultism, amazing podcast. Please listen to it if you feel like opening up your mind a little bit. Anyway, close of another parenthesis. We have the hero's journey, which is a hero having a problem that doesn't believe is fixable. Someone gives him or her a duty, and then we are presented with an obstacle. We're presented with a mean guy, and then we're presented with a tool, and then with a helper. And there are many subcategories to that. It's the analysis of Mr. Vladimir Prop. I'm gonna write his name. If you're interested, please check him out. If you haven't already. I mean, I know my audience, you're all sophisticated little creatures. We can trace that even to our recent fairy tales, as in fairy tales that have science fiction, or fairy tales that has been adapted to cinema. For example, Game of Thrones, or Narnia, or Alice in Wonderland, or even better, Lord of the Rings. I'm not gonna steal the analysis of the Know Thyself podcast, but I will refer to it simply as we're presented with a hero, Frodo, that has to accomplish something, take the ring to Mordor. He doesn't believe he can do that. Now he has help. He has his other hobbits. He has his hobbits supporting him, and he has some tools, but he also has some obstacles, if you remember the spider or other stuff. And at the end of the journey, he has learned that he was indeed capable of doing that. He just had to believe, and even if he was afraid, he had to do it while being afraid. This is something that we face so many times in our lives. We can believe that we are not suitable for doing something, yet we still do it, or even if we do it, even if we don't do it on the exact moment that we think that we should, we accomplish that. And we have a lot of stories. I mean, growing up, I used to think that, okay, one person is only for one purpose, or one person has only one story, like the main theme. No. Maybe cinema has influenced us on believing so, but a story ends, another begins for us. And we prove to ourselves regularly that, oh, I didn't think I can do that, yet I can, yet we cross those limitations we have put on ourselves, or we have let society put on ourselves. Because society is a mirror, and we are the mirror of society. Now, all those wonderful stories, Narnia, Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, not so much Narnia, they have their own language, a made-up language, not as in Esperanto. If you're not familiar, Esperanto was the first and only language that was created solely by someone saying, yeah, I'll create that. Usually languages form from a need, and they are unconsciously evolving, and they are adapting to the needs. No, I'm not gonna look at that and say, oh, I'll remember that. I'll rename that. I'll keep remembering it as the name that I have just renamed it. No. And even if we do, even if we try to, we won't remember that. This is why it needs to be unconscious, because something triggers something else and we remember it. Anyway, I am going a bit off topic, but it's so interesting that many people wanted to present another language in their fairy tales. And we believe that something magical has to have another way of communicating, because we don't speak the same language as the one that is magical. That means we distinguish ourselves from the thing that we consider magical, ethereal, fairy tale like. Why have we stripped ourselves from the enthusiasm of a fairy tale? And it has affected, obviously, how we perceive life. I used to think that when someone dies, like, life begins here and then it's here. But probably life begins here, lower, the middle is the higher, and the end is again low. If you're lucky, it's gonna be here. If you're not, it's gonna be here. The same way you started, the same way you were born. And if you're truly unlucky, it's gonna be lower than you were born. And that is on ancient Greek philosophers. And that's on observation. On a similar note, Mr. Bettenheim, he wasn't French, as you can tell, has presented us with the more psychoanalytical point of view. He has done an amazing work of really perceiving fairy tales as something that is a place where one can stimulate imagination. We see when we try to work with children, I mean, God forbid I do it, but no, really, God forbid me not want to do it. People who work with children, they use fairy tales to stimulate imagination. They use fairy tales to teach, not in the strict way of Mr. Charles Perrault, but they use fairy tales to teach. It has been shown that a lot of lonely children have been improved by listening to fairy tales, and we all need something to identify with. We crave the difference, yet we identify ourselves with something different. Thus, we belong somewhere. A child is not a creature of peace. When we are children, we have a lot of questions, and we have a lot of things that trouble our minds. Me, I was an only child. I didn't have the sibling rivalry and all that vengeance that is looking for a place to happen. Besides that, loneliness or parents' relations or an economical state of the family can affect the child more than one would like to think, or more than one tries or dares to remember, because we have all been children. This is another weird thing. Back in the day where Charles Perrault was alive and creating the society back there used to believe that children were just a miniature of the world, and children should be directed on a path. Used to believe that children are in the wrong, that's why they behave like that, and we have to. But isn't that so ironic? We've all been children. In that way, if an old person comes up and says, yeah, they're wrong, he's automatically saying that to himself. Like, oh my god, I was wrong. Subconsciously adopting the attitude of his parents, that when he was a child, that poor man, because obviously he's a man, wished they had shown some empathy. So one could ask, where did fairy tales come from? Why did we develop that genre? It is indeed the development of a genre, because before the fairy tale becoming a trend, we used to have novels, like long books. And I love it. It's my favorite genre, but it can tire you. We are complex creatures. We are creatures of paradoxes. Whatever we consume that is great, that is wonderful, without a limit, it can bore us. It can make us feel tired, because we're not one thing, we're many things. And if we are this many things, we need food for everyone, every one of the things that we are. And I'm in the happy place to announce that women were taking action on writing fairy tales also, and I'm very happy about it. I mean, obviously, women who lived in Europe in that day, and not Europe as in the Mediterranean Sea, but Europe, France, and England, obviously. If I remember her name correctly, we have Madame Olwa, yeah, and we have Madame de Maintenon. Now, this is an important figure because she was the teacher of the bastards of the king. Wow, right? And the poor king fell in love with her. He died, and then she took the liberty of controlling the kingdom. And at the end of the 17th century, it was dark for France. It was dark because this woman was very Christian. She used to say to her people, do that, show respect, and obey the rituals, as in a very strong fasting period. That's Muslim. But yeah, you get the point. She was very severe, but she changed education. She changed the educational system, and we can still thank her. Even if her ways weren't good, she still managed to do something good. We see that all the time. Yeah, obviously, something good can be achieved by something bad, but why do we need the bad? Yeah, we're grateful it happened, at least it happened, but shouldn't we just wake up and accept a little bit more joy and calmness and a more soft way of being? I see a lot of people being really motivated by harsh words, someone doubting them. Oh my god, I want praise, like not unhealthy praise. Just if I do something correctly and you say good job, I'll do two things and I'll be happy because the pressure will be lifted up. Now, I'm not judging everyone that behaves in another way, that is motivated in another way. I'm just pointing out that all that pressure, even if it helps you, it can be achieved, the end result can be achieved without so much negativity, because negativity is stored in the body and in the mind also, and no one is a saint, and no one has to be a saint. You're gonna need to let something out, and maybe your bottle will be filled all the way up, and maybe it doesn't need to be like that. Maybe it doesn't need to be, oh, I'll have an explosion, or oh my god, I don't know why I had an explosion. Anyway, this is something that I notice a lot when I observe the educational system and how people motivate their students. And that is my opinion. I forgot to mention a very important thing. I think I have already mentioned it before, but during classicism, people were so invested on having portraits, and we see art being very realistic and not symbols or surrealism or baroque or all that good stuff. Why? Because people were so suppressed that they weren't looking inward. They were always looking outward. And they were always looking at other people, observing, saying so little, writing so little, because they were always on the look for someone to be wrong. Because if someone was wrong, someone else could be right. People were so well behaved, like nothing violent. The violence was inward. People used to observe so much, even a smirk at the wrong time could get someone very in trouble. And we have the rise of the portrait, and this is such a human thing, so complex yet so evident. People were observing. It was the century of the theater, not because the theater was up as in a trend, but because people were living by playing their role so well. It is wonderful. It is significant. Not so significant as surrealism, obviously. Me, I love some surrealism, but Charles Perrault really uses his imagination to suppress time, to really not make it evident. Those elements that we see, he also, on his fairy tales, he describes a lot of mirrors. And back in the day in Italy, there were very elegant mirrors painted and something like a portrait also. It was a trend. Everyone who was rich, they always used to have one, an Italian mirror. And he describes it a lot in Bluebeard and in Cinderella. Now, Cinderella's father used to be exactly like Perrault economically, and he used to travel. Here comes the important part about the Brothers Grimm. But before that, Perrault is very amazing because he has accomplished many stuff. One is to talk to audiences, both children and adults, because he has some subtle humor that is not so subtle, but let's say subtle because children didn't notice it, and because he suppresses time, yet we still see mirrors, yet we can still understand the time of that. And I'm gonna go ahead and ask you, can imagination really be pure? Because if you strip a fairy tale the time, then you make it without time. If you strip a fairy tale of place, then you make it without a place. Then everything can be possible, right? If it has no place, if it has no time, everyone can be anything. But no, he chooses to be very realistic, and I dare you to imagine something that isn't anchored in reality. You can't. And I always used to imagine life as in something more complex or an adventure more complex, you know, fairy tale and how my mind was shaped. The truth is, you can't. Or maybe you can't just yet. Because we cannot think of a color that doesn't exist. We cannot think of a color that we haven't seen. We cannot imagine, we cannot dream of someone we haven't seen, even unconsciously. We see people in our dreams that we don't know, but we have seen them. Our unconscious has picked it up. An example of his humor, women back in the day, they used to faint a lot. And it was an escape, but it was also a disease. But it was very romanticized. You know, you're probably chronically online and you have seen the memes. And he says, yada yada, she fainted, like women always do, when presented with uncomfortable situations. And he said that. It isn't subtle the way I say it, but a child wouldn't understand that. So he has as a way of captivating the audience to make them laugh. Not necessarily because he said something funny, and to teach children. And he has accomplished that. It's funny to see that, well, not so funny at all, but it's very interesting to see that there is a secret third destinator. Also, this man, Charles Perrault, he used to not like people, like the common people. He used to say that people from below middle class, like lower middle class and below middle class, they are an animal that we shouldn't dare to wake up. He legit said that. He said that we, as in rich people and, you know, the king and his associates. And there is a very beautiful scene actually in Alice in Wonderland, another fairy tale. We see the Red Queen having people, you know, she has a really big forehead. I'm talking about the movie. We see the Red Queen having people next to her, and they have all big ears or a big nose or big lips. I don't remember. I remember the nose and the ears. Towards her decadence, towards her fall, one person's nose and one person's chin, a prosthetic one, fall off. And she said, oh my god, the Red Queen said, oh my god, you're fooling me? And it was exactly what happened in the court of France on Versailles. I found it very, very well. I mean, Alice in Wonderland, I could sit here for hours and hours and talk about it. Cinderella was written by Brothers Grimm, of course, and you know it. Now, Cinderella, we have many versions, and indeed, Charles Perrault was very influential. We have parodies even now. In comparative literature, we still see people being inspired by those fairy tales, people wanting to create their own versions. And this is really important. This shows the influence, the magnitude. Not something necessarily good can influence us, not something necessarily bad can influence us, obviously. So, Cinderella, that was written by Brothers Grimm, they used to present her more as in a child and not as an obedient, suppressed little woman. We have more symbols, and it's a fairy tale longer than usual. Cinderella is presented as a child with emotions. We see her mother actually dying, and it's the opening scene of the fairy tale. And after her mother's death, a tree is planted on her grave. Cinderella goes and visits a lot, and she actually demands from the tree, in hour of need, something. As in Charles Perrault, this doesn't exist. He has completely ignored the mother of Cinderella. And Cinderella has been very badly treated by the evil mother of the other two sisters. And in Brother Grimm's fairy tale, she is looking for revenge. In opposition to Charles Perrault fairy tale, Cinderella is very patient. She actually helps the sisters who had harmed her to marry wealthy men. This is another Christian model. Forgive and forget and help someone in need. Another bizarre thing about Charles Perrault that we don't see it on Brothers Grimm. In Sleeping Beauty, we have a comment saying when Sleeping Beauty wakes up after 100 years, the prince says, "I didn't want to say something about your clothes because they reminded me of my grandma." Honey, she is older than your grandma. But anyway, we can still see humor, and we can still see something subtle, something that reminds us of reality. And Brother Grimm's did a really great job with Cinderella and the tree. Now we see tree as a rebirth, and we use it. I mean, when a child is born, we plant a tree to symbolize its growth. And when someone dies, usually in America and in states far away from me, the people, when they die, they become ashes. Sometimes the people remaining, they spread the ashes and then they plant a tree on top of them, like someone was rebirthed. Okay, people aren't like me. They're not gonna be like, oh, a symbol, I love the symbol, but symbols are used. And I really deeply appreciate it, which leads me, I don't know for how much I have yapped, but which leads me to our wonderful art for today, because we are towards our end, sadly. Here's an artwork from Paul Klee. You can see there's a witch. I'll insert it here. The genre is Bauhaus. We have the witch's scene. He was really influenced by the supernatural, the mythical, and surreal stuff. And I chose that today because even if Charles Perrault was choosing a Christian model, symbols, the surreal, rituals are everywhere. And I love Paul Klee and his art because the bizarre and the supernatural and that element is always there. Fairy tales are like that. Fairy tales are wild. Fairy tales represent something more free than we were led to believe. And you'll see that in the painting there's a witch. She's bizarre. It's not really very pleasant to look at her. There's a scale, something like tap tap tap, that functions as an anchor to reality. Because we want to give meaning to everything. Why? To anchor our reality. Are we without meaning? That's an absurdism. It's our innate tendency, so we can feel better, so we can interpret things more, so we can feel safer. Why? So we can explore. And to see who exploring, you might see a witch, you might see someone very familiar with alchemy, you will see bizarre stuff while exploring, and you'll need an anchor. And that anchor is reality, which leads us back to but one of the questions: can we truly imagine something out of reality? Purely. And one day I would like to say that yes, we can. But we keep creating out of mimesis and out of a weird combination that has never been combined before. Maybe I'm talking too abstractly here. Maybe you understand me. I do not underestimate you by all means. Thank you so much for listening to this promised episode. I promised it, I delivered, yeah, anyway. I have Instagram, my name is Artives. It's not my real name. I have TikTok, please search me there. My name is Artives. If you prefer listening to my voice only, you can search me up on Spotify. My name is Artives. If you prefer Spotify, I would very much appreciate if you left a critic. But I realized that not many people know how to do it, and not many people have Spotify. But anyway, whatever you prefer. Thank you again for the company. Bye!